Horror games have an unusual and experimental history that dates back to the early days of video games development, with primitive examples to graphical, visual masterpieces that are considered to be almost too real to unnerve the player in ways that were never considered possible. The possibilities are endless, yet the goal has always been with the intention to leave a lasting impact on those brave enough to venture into the depths of the unknown. However, there have been many ups and downs throughout the journey to create the ultimate survival horror experience. Yet, while there have been many games that have left their mark on the genre, there are a few lesser known titles that, although may not be considered as groundbreaking, they have unintentionally provided the inspiration for many incredible entries that we now see today. In all honesty, without these entries, the survival horror genre might have taken a different path, as it has taken developers and companies years to understand the true roots of what makes a definitive horror experience, with many becoming confused as to the direction of the genre when moving into a more action-focused approach during the mid-2000s that would provide many questions as to the future of the genre. Looking back over the long and rich yet experimental history of horror video games, there have been a few games that have added many unique elements to drive the genre forward, and many of these titles can be found dating back to the iconic days of the first PlayStation console that would become the true home of survival horror. One of the titles we will look at in this video goes by the name of Overblood, that was also created by the same developers of another inspirational yet rare horror game called Dr. Hauser that would be released in Japan only for the Panasonic 3DO games console in 1994. Overblood is a survival horror game developed by Riverhillsofts and published by Electronic Arts for the PlayStation console, and was released in 1997 in Europe and Japan, that would take on much inspiration from both Dr. Hauser and the iconic Resident Evil. The game is set in a research facility located on a remote island, where the player takes on the role of Raz Karsi, who wakes up in a cryogenic pod with no memory of who he is or how he got there. He must navigate a mysterious research facility filled with dangerous creatures and uncover the truth about his past and the nature of the experiments being conducted there. He must use whatever means necessary to survive and escape the underground laboratory, as it has become overrun with horrific monsters due to many failed experiments, leading to the series of terrifying events. Raz would later cross paths with two additional characters in the form of a robot named People and one of the laboratory scientists, Millie Azray, who together must work with him to find a way to escape and to uncover the reasons behind the chaos being witnessed. Raz would later discover that he is in fact a clone of the head scientist responsible for all of the experiments. Millie herself is also a clone of Raz's wife, who was killed during an accident, but would have all of her original memories and knowledge intact, whereas Raz was left with no memory of who he is until he later discovers the truth of what happened. The events would lead to a final battle, with Raz's real form, the head scientist, where he has also been infected with the same virus being used on the test subjects within the facility, also transforming him into a monster. Overblood's gameplay was heavily influenced by Resident Evil, Dr. Hauser, and Alone in the Dark, yet it also distinguished itself with its more detailed and immersive 3D environments, as well as its emphasis on exploration and puzzle solving, while also implementing combat elements seen previously in Alone in the Dark, that allowed the player to mix both weapon and hand-to-hand combat mechanics to defeat enemies. Overblood would be the first fully 3D horror game seen on the PlayStation, and also introduced several innovative gameplay mechanics that would later become staples of the survival horror genre, including the ability to examine and manipulate objects in the environment, which combined elements of horror fiction with gameplay mechanics that emphasized exploration, puzzle solving and resource management, and also followed a similar gameplay formula to other popular survival horror games as with Resident Evil and Silent Hill. The use of changing between different characters in various areas, from caverns, pits, small access tunnels and vents, to solve puzzles and overcome many of the dangerous obstacles you will face throughout your journey, would be essential to your progress. The game encouraged players to carefully examine the environment, searching for clues and items that could help them move forward. These features help to create a more immersive and engaging experience for players, Additionally, Overblood's detailed 3D environments were groundbreaking for the time. The game's developers utilised advanced rendering techniques to create environments that were more realistic and immersive than those found in earlier horror games. The game's innovative gameplay mechanics and immersive environments helped to revolutionise the survival horror genre, paving the way for later classics such as Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill. Dr. Hauser was primarily the main inspiration for the development of Overblood, with the game's lead designer citing Dr. Hauser as a direct influence on Overblood's gameplay mechanics and design. In an interview with Hardcore Gaming 101, stated that the development team was impressed by the way Dr. Hauser's 3D environments were used to create an immersive and terrifying atmosphere. The team sought to improve on this concept by creating more detailed and interactive environments in Overblood, which would help to draw players into the game's world and increase the sense of dread and horror. Like Dr. Hauser, Overblood emphasised exploration and puzzle solving over combat, as you really needed to survey each environment to find hidden items, keys, codes, and health items that you would need to progress, as not everything is what it would seem and never straightforward, so you would need to take more care and attention to find what you need. The game also incorporated several innovative gameplay mechanics, with the option to change different viewing perspectives, from fixed camera to third and first person angles to alter the experience of play for each player, as the ability to examine and manipulate objects in the environment, which were inspired by Dr. Hauser's interactive environments and set pieces. The game's immersive 3D environments and emphasis on exploration were key inspirations for the development team at Riverhillsofts, who sought to build upon these concepts to create a more engaging and terrifying experience for players. The result was a game which remains an influential example of the survival horror genre today. Overblood received mixed reviews upon its release, with critics praising its unique gameplay mechanics and atmosphere, but criticised its awkward controls, camera, and lack of enemy encounters, stopping it from becoming a true hit within the horror genre. Despite its reviews, Overblood is still unknown to many horror game enthusiasts, but would still influence many elements that can be later seen in iconic games such as Silent Hill, which also emphasised exploration and puzzle solving, with better combat mechanics, to create a truly dark, terrifying and gritty atmosphere never witnessed in any horror game at that time. However, for those that have witnessed and experienced the game, it is considered a classic among survival horror fans. Overblood is considered to be one of the earliest examples of survival horror games on the PlayStation, predating other popular games in the genre such as the iconic Silent Hill and even the Dino Crisis series. Despite being an innovative example of the survival horror genre, Overblood is largely forgotten within the video game space. The game's lack of commercial success, combined with the dominance of other horror franchises such as Resident Evil and Silent Hill, have contributed to its obscurity in the gaming community. However, the game's influence on the horror genre cannot be understated, as it was influential in the development of other horror games and helped to establish the PlayStation as the home of survival horror. Overall, Overblood is considered to be an important step in the evolution of horror games on the PlayStation. It influenced other games and genres and helped to establish the console as a destination for true horror fans. Games like the Silent Hill series, which debuted on the PlayStation shortly after Overblood, borrowed from its ideas, use of inventory management and limited resources. In addition to these gameplay elements, Overblood's atmosphere and setting also had an impact on the horror genre. In conclusion, Overblood may have been a forgotten example in the horror video game space, but its innovative ideas were crucial in shaping the survival horror genre long into the future. The game's emphasis on exploration and puzzle solving, along with its immersive atmosphere, environments, and advanced rendering techniques, were groundbreaking and helped to pave the way for the development of later survival horror titles. Overblood was just another step in the progression of the development of the survival horror genre, and yet there are still many other obscure and long forgotten titles that need to be looked at to discover even more elements and history of horror games, which you can learn more about by watching this next video to witness even more unknown games within the genre.